Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026.
hmm
And look, if you have been scrolling through any feed or listening to the news, or honestly just walking outside lately, you know the temperature.
Oh, yeah.
The political climate isn't just hot right now, it is scorched earth. We are seeing things with immigration enforcement, these mass deportation initiatives that just feel incredibly heavy.
It feels volatile.
Yeah.
We're watching history unfold in real time. And it's that specific kind of history that, makes you hold your breath.
It's not the boring kind.
No, it's the kind where the ground feels like it's shifting under your feet every single day.
It really is. And that tension brings us to today's stack. We're doing something a little different.
Lou.
Usually we look at a dense article or a new book. Today we're analyzing a phenomenon. We're looking at a viral explosion that started with a single video, a monologue from a creator responding to a comment left by the parent of an ICE agent. But it didn't stop there. It morphed into this massive digital town hall with hundreds of voices weighing in.
And what makes this stack so compelling, for me at least, is that it's not really a debate about policy. It isn't a back and forth about, is this law good or bad?
No.
It's a warning. It is a forensic, step-by-step breakdown of what happens when the political winds shift. It's almost a prediction of the future based on the mechanics of the past.
And that's the mission for today. We're going to unpack this argument that political power is inherently cyclical. We aren't just saying what goes up must come down. We are looking at the specific mechanics, the how, of a predicted reckoning for law enforcement agents who feel untouchable right now.
And we've got the financial paper trails, some really terrifying digital forensics that I hadn't even thought about, and a look at the psychology of betrayal.
It's essentially a case study in what international lawyers call transitional justice.
That's a good way to put it.
The central question this source material poses is simple but, well, devastating. When the pendulum of power inevitably swings back, and history tells us it always does,
Always.
are the people currently riding the wave prepared for the crash?
Let's start with the catalyst, the spark.
Yes.
We have this creator responding to a parent of an ICE agent. The parent was defending their child, presumably saying, they're just doing their job.
And the creator's response wasn't a scream fest. It wasn't an attack. It was calm, almost helpful, but in a way that just makes your skin crawl.
And they started by quoting their mother. Operating without an eye for consequences. That was the phrase.
That's the line. My mother's always been there to offer me words of wisdom when I was operating in life without an eye for consequences. It really frames the whole discussion.
It does.
The argument is that right now, here in early 2026, many agents are operating with zero eye for consequences because they've fallen into a belief trap.
Right. They believe the current administration, the Trump administration, will essentially last forever.
This is a documented psychological phenomenon, isn't it, in authoritarian or strongman regimes?
It is. When a leader projects absolute strength and actively reshapes the government, the people working for them lose the ability to imagine a future without that leader.
It feels permanent.
It feels like the new normal will be the forever normal. But the source material pivots hard here. They state flatly, nothing can be further from the truth.
And this is where we move from philosophy to the gritty details, the how. The source makes a very specific prediction about the money.
Yes.
And I want you to break this down because they aren't talking about cutting budgets or, defunding the police in the traditional sense.
No, they're talking about reallocation. The source highlights that currently we've seen the Civil Rights Division at the DOJ, the Department of Justice, essentially gutted.
Right.
That's where the money used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, tens of millions have been poured into DHS and ICE for enforcement. That's the current reality. We are funding the sword, not the shield.
So the prediction isn't that a future administration comes in and just shuts down ICE overnight.
Exactly. Bureaucracies are hard to kill, but they are incredibly easy to aim. The prediction is that a future administration takes those exact millions of dollars, the money currently fueling the raids,
Okay.
strips it from the enforcement arm, and funnels it directly back into the Civil Rights Division. And they have a very specific purchase order in mind.
Attorneys.
Attorneys.
The source phrased it as hiring a shit ton of attorneys.
Blunt, but accurate. It's what we call a bureaucratic pivot.
Right.
You don't need to pass new laws through a gridlocked Congress. You don't need a revolution. You just change the funding mandate. Instead of paying people to kick down doors, you pay people to read files.
And the source argues these attorneys will be hired with one metric of success:
process the backlog.
Process the backlog of civil rights abuse cases. It paints this picture of an assembly line. Not of cars, but of litigation. Just file after file after file.
And the source claims this will be easily prosecutable.
Now, usually, civil rights cases are hard to prove. It's he said, she said. Why is the source so confident that these will be slam dunks?
Because of the tactical pocket.
Okay, I loved this phrase, but it also terrified me.
Right.
The tactical pocket. Let's unpack what that actually means for you, the listener, because it sounds like military jargon, but it's actually about consumer tech.
So think about the image we have of the secret police, right?
Yeah.
Agents in tactical gear, faces covered by balaclavas or masks, no name tags.
Total anonymity.
In the old days, that was effective anonymity. If you couldn't identify the face, you couldn't prosecute the man.
Yeah.
But the source argues that in 2026, the mask is essentially a placebo.
It just makes the agent feel safe.
Right, but it hides nothing.
Because they're carrying their own snitches.
In a way, yes. The source points out that while these agents are on duty, suited up, kicking indoors, they are almost certainly carrying their personal cell phones.
In their tactical pockets.
Exactly. They want to check texts from their spouse or check sports scores during downtime. It's human nature.
And this is where the tech gets forensic. The methodology described, it sounded like something out of a cyberpunk novel or a high-end episode of CSI. They talked about overlaying data sets.
It's called metadata correlation. It's a standard digital forensics technique, but applying it to mass accountability is the twist here. Here's how it works.
Okay.
You have the body cam footage or the tactical footage from the raid. That footage has a timestamp and a GPS location stamp. That is layer A.
That tells you a crime happened here at this time.
Okay, so layer A is the official record. Layer B is the cell tower data. Every cell phone is constantly handshaking with local towers, pinging its location to within a few meters. So a prosecutor 3 years from now doesn't need to see the agent's face.
Oh.
They just take the timestamp of the abuse from the video,
Yeah.
look at the cell tower records for that exact coordinate at that exact second, and see whose personal iPhone was standing 3 feet away.
That is hard to argue with. It's math.
It's digital exhaust.
Right.
You leave it everywhere you go. You can't turn it off unless you leave the phone at home or in a Faraday cage, which
That's people don't do.
we know people don't do that. We're addicted to our connectivity.
And the commenters were all over this. I saw user Miss Victoria typing in all caps about payroll records.
Yeah.
And another user, Nanyashit, gotta love the internet usernames, pointed out that the government literally has their home addresses.
It raises a crucial point about the nature of federal employment. You cannot be a shadowy, ghost-like figure if you are waiting for a direct deposit every 2 weeks.
Right.
As user Cleveland Smith 290 noted, their names are on paper. They are filling out W-2s. They are selecting health benefits. They are accruing vacation time.
It's an aha moment. We see the uniform and the gun and think warrior, but the system sees an employee ID number.
And that administrator's spreadsheet, which seems so boring right now,
Yeah.
becomes the primary discovery document in the lawsuit 3 years from now.
It connects the anonymous mask to the bank account.
It effectively destroys the concept of secret police in a modern bureaucracy.
So we've established the money will move to prosecutors and the data will identify the agents. But now let's talk about the human element.
Yeah.
Because if the tech is cold, the psychology here is hot. The source predicts the future courtroom battles won't be noble defenses. They call it a shitty reality TV show.
That's a very deliberate metaphor. It implies chaos, drama, and a total lack of dignity.
And the prediction is that the blue wall of silence, that code where cops don't rat on cops,
You're going to crumble.
instantly. The source says, IC agents will begin throwing one another under the bus, offering testimony to avoid accountability for themselves. It's the prisoner's dilemma, isn't it?
It is. And historically, the blue wall holds up against external pressure, but it often collapses under individual legal jeopardy.
Makes sense.
When the institution can no longer protect the individual protects themselves. But there is a darker, more specific layer here that the source warns about.
The racial dynamic, this part was chilling. The source explicitly speaks to minority ICE agents. The warning is, who do you think those racist white ICE agents are going to point the finger at?
It suggests that the scapegoating won't be random. It will follow the path of least resistance, which in America, unfortunately, often follows racial lines.
So if the ship is sinking and everyone is scrambling for a lifeboat,
Which in this case is a plea deal.
the source argues that white agents will turn on their minority colleagues to save their own skins. They'll say he did it, or I was just following his lead, or he was the aggressor.
And it doesn't stop at the trial. The source walks us all the way to prison. They warn these minority agents that if they end up incarcerated, they are landing in a no man's land.
Right. Prison politics are strictly segregated by race and affiliation.
And then the source points out the obvious. The Aryan gangs aren't going to protect a minority former federal agent.
And the ethnically specific gangs, Latino gangs, black gangs.
The source asks a haunting question. I wonder during this period of time how many of their relatives you will detain and or deport.
It's a terrifying prospect. Total isolation in a hostile environment where every faction has a reason to target you.
It really drives home the risk.
And yet, there's this carrot dangling in front of them right now. We have to talk about the $50,000 bonus.
The recruitment and retention bonus, it's a lot of money. For a lot of people, that's life-changing cash.
It is, but the comment section was tearing this apart. You have users like Fernando Quintana and Grandpa Jefe joking, well, half joking, that the bonus is just a retainer.
A retainer for their future defense lawyers. Yeah. It's a grim joke, but financially, it's probably accurate.
I mean, federal or state court cases are not cheap.
Not at all.
And the strings attached. Commenters like Aztecat and Mercedes Derbides 1 were pointing out the fine print. It's not a lump sum you get for signing up and walking away.
No, it requires years of service. That's the golden handcuffs concept. If you leave before the term is up, or, crucially, if you are terminated for cause or prosecuted,
you have to pay it back.
that money often has to be paid back. So imagine a scenario where you are being sued by the DOJ for civil rights violations. You've lost your job. And now the government is demanding you pay back the 50 grand you already spent on a truck.
The source calls it fool's gold. All that glitters is not gold. It's a trap that mortgages your future freedom for a check today.
And that creates a psychological toll. The source describes this future state where agents are just waiting for a knock at the door.
That creates a persistent, low-level hum of anxiety. You're looking over your shoulder at the grocery store. You flinch when the doorbell rings.
It's a heavy way to live knowing the clock is ticking.
Which transitions us perfectly to the historical context. I was honestly overwhelmed by how many commenters brought up one specific historical event.
Nuremberg.
The Nuremberg trials.
It's the inevitable comparison. When we talk about systemic accountability for just following orders, all roads lead to Nuremberg.
It was everywhere. Users like Sarg075, Oregon Wolfpack, know me all referencing Nuremberg 2.0. And one user, 12B Combat Engineer, really broke down the legal precedent. They pointed out that the just following orders defense, what was actually known as the Befehlsnotstand defense, was rejected.
That is a crucial distinction that often gets lost. In international law, and increasingly in domestic human rights views, you have an affirmative duty to disobey an illegal order.
So saying, my boss told me to do it, is not a legal shield.
Not at all. It might mitigate sentencing slightly, but it doesn't stop the conviction.
There was this one comment from Carnival 88 that really stuck with me. They compared the current situation to the secret police in Europe in the 1930s.
Okay.
They said the only thing secret about them was which laws they decided to follow. But the kicker was the end of the comment.
What was it?
They said people back then shrugged and did nothing because the leader promised to lower prices on eggs.
Wow, that hits hard. It's the banality of complicity.
Right.
We often think of history as good guys versus monsters, but usually it's just people trading liberty or the liberty of their neighbors for economic comfort, the price of eggs.
It makes the complicity feel very mundane, very transactional. It forces us to look in the mirror.
It grounds it. We aren't just talking about evil. We're talking about indifference. But let's look at the legal battlefield of the future, because I know some listeners are thinking, wait, can't the president just pardon everyone?
There's a lot of skepticism.
It's a valid question. The pardon power is broad.
People are saying Trump will just pardon them or the Supreme Court is stacked. But the source material offers a counter strategy. First, on the courts, the prediction is that a future administration might just play hardball, expand the Supreme Court, stack it with 13 or 15 justices.
Court expansion is the nuclear option in American politics.
It is.
But the source is presenting it as a necessary corrective measure. Basically saying, if the courts are broken and partisan, you fix them by diluting the current power.
But the real loophole, and I want you to really explain this because I think this is the gotcha that a lot of agents might be missing.
The state charges.
Is the distinction between federal and state charges.
This is the concept of dual sovereignty. It is the critical piece of the puzzle. The President of the United States has the power to pardon federal crimes. He cannot, under any circumstances, pardon state crimes.
So if an agent breaks a state law?
Exactly. If an ICE agent commits an assault or a murder or a kidnapping within the jurisdiction of, say, California or New York or Illinois, that state's attorney general can bring charges.
And the president can't stop that.
The federal pardon is useless in the state court. You could have a federal pardon framed on your wall and still go to a state prison for 20 years.
And the commenters are acutely aware of this. They brought up specific names. There's mention of an agent named Jonathan Ross, who was allegedly outed, and the tragic case of Renee Nicole Good. Commenters are noting that for crimes like murder, there is no statute of limitations.
Right. You can be charged 10, 20, 30 years later. You could be a grandfather, retired, thinking you got away with it, and the state police knock on your door because the political winds in that state shifted.
The source also points out how fragile their anonymity is, even now, let alone in the future. There was a mention of J.D. Vance.
High-profile figure, yeah.
The claim is that he tried to defend an agent who was allegedly dragged by a vehicle, but in doing so, he basically doxed the guy.
It was user 2195471111143 who flagged that. It highlights the incompetence factor.
Yeah.
Even if politicians want to protect these agents, they're often clumsy.
Sure.
Vance jumps in front of a camera to score a political point and accidentally puts a spotlight on an agent who wanted to stay hidden.
It just proves that in the digital age, you cannot hide. And relying on a politician to protect you is risky business.
Very risky. They might burn you by accident, or they might burn you on purpose just to change the news cycle. Self-interest is the only constant in politics.
So we've got the legal theory, the tech, the history, but let's check the pulse of the room. What is the vibe of the people watching this unfold?
The comment section.
It acts like a barometer for public sentiment. And let me tell you, it is a weird cocktail of hope, fear, and religion.
It's intense. What stood out to you most?
The hope for justice is palpable, almost aggressive. People like Mike Ike saying can't happen soon enough, or Manny Bruce saying the trials are going to be their favorite TV show.
It's a desire for catharsis.
Yeah.
People feel helpless right now against the machinery of the state, so they project a future where the scales balance out. They need to believe the bad guys get caught.
But then there is the deep fear. Users like Dibflude and Momo are terrified. They aren't convinced there will even be an election in 2026 or 2028.
Wow.
They're talking about martial law, misspelled usually, but the point stands, in pointing out things like the White House being renovated.
They see that renovation as a sign of entrenching power. It's cynicism born of trauma. When you see norms breaking down day after day, you stop believing the system has the capacity to self-correct.
You assume the worst-case scenario is the only scenario.
Right.
And even if the system survives, some are cynical about the opposition. User useless apt name for this sentiment wrote that Democrats will just say, we have to move past it for the sake of the country, and nobody will be punished.
Which, to be fair to the cynics, has happened before. The look forward, not backward approach was used after the War on Terror regarding torture, for example.
That's a good point.
It often leaves victims without justice in the name of political stability.
True. But then, rising above all that, you have the religious element. This was huge in the stack. So many comments invoking God. God sits high and looks low. Karma. Things done in the dark come to the light. It feels like when the legal system fails, people appeal to a higher court.
It's the ultimate court of appeals. When earthly justice seems blocked or corrupt, people find comfort in the idea of divine justice. It's a way of maintaining moral order in a world that feels completely chaotic.
It's a way of saying, you might trick the judge, but you can't trick the universe. So let's bring this all together. We are sitting here in January 2026. The argument from this viral deep dive is clear. Political immunity is temporary.
And the evidence being created today, video, payroll, location data, is permanent.
And the cost of the actions being taken right now will be paid in the future, likely with interest.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really a lesson about time. Time is the master here. Agents operating today might feel invincible because they're looking at the calendar of today.
But the source is asking them to look at the calendar of tomorrow.
History suggests that the pendulum always swings. Power is never static.
It brings us back to that mother's wisdom, operating with an eye for consequences.
Precisely. You have to live your life assuming that the lights will eventually come on.
So here is the thought I want to leave you with today, and it's a provocative one, whether you are in law enforcement or just working a regular 9 to 5. Imagine you are at your job today. But imagine you know for a fact that every single email you send, every movement you make, and every interaction you have is being timestamped, backed up, and saved.
Specifically for a prosecutor.
Specifically for a prosecutor who hates you, who will open that file 3 years from now.
That changes things.
It changes everything. If you knew that was happening, how differently would you behave right now? And the real question is the fear of that future accountability enough to change behavior today before the gavel actually drops?
That is the question every agent needs to ask themselves before they clock in tomorrow.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll be watching the pendulum.
Always.
See you next time.
So, a video from a social media creator went absolutely viral. It was a direct warning to ICE agents, and it kicked off a massive public debate. The prediction? That a day of legal reckoning is coming for actions being taken right now. Okay, let's break down this viral prediction and the incredible response it sparked. This is how the creator kicked the whole thing off. It's not some dry policy analysis, right? It's a direct, personal call-out. I mean, what an opening. It immediately grabs your attention and sets the tone for a message that does not pull any punches. So first up, let's talk about the warning itself. It's interesting. The creator frames it less like an attack and more like, well, a piece of friendly advice. They call it words of wisdom for people they believe are only looking at the here and now, not thinking about the long game. The entire argument, the whole thing, really hinges on one simple, fundamental truth. Political administrations don't last forever. That's the bedrock of this whole prediction, the core idea that in the US, power inevitably eventually changes hands. At the heart of it all is this claim that agents are operating under this false sense of security, as if the current political situation is permanent. And this is the exact idea, this assumption of permanence, that the creator sets out to completely dismantle. And there is zero ambiguity in their tone here. The message is just crystal clear. A change in power isn't a possibility, it's an absolute certainty. The only real question is when it's going to happen. Okay, so for power shift is the why, then the next big question is how? How would this supposed reckoning actually work? Well, the creator lays out a very specific vision for the legal machinery they believe will be put into motion. The argument is basically a complete reversal. The creator says, look at the money right now. It's flowing away from the DOJ Civil Rights Division and to ICE and DHS. The prediction is that a new administration just flips a switch. They'll turn that money spigot right back around, refunding and re-empowering the exact division that's designed to prosecute civil rights abuses. So the predicted path is laid out as a pretty clear chain reaction. First, a new administration comes in. Second, the budget gets rerouted back to the DOJ's Civil Rights Division. Third, and this is a direct quote, they hire a shit ton of attorneys to start digging through the backlog of cases. And fourth, those prosecutors get to work. But you might be wondering, how would they actually prove any of this stuff? Well, that leads us to the evidence trail. The creator and a ton of commenters argue these cases will be, and I'm quoting here, easily prosecutable. Why? Because they believe every single action leaves a digital footprint, a paper trail that's nearly impossible to erase. The creator even calls out specific attempts to stay anonymous, like wearing masks. They're basically saying, yeah, nice try, but it's not going to work. The point is that a physical disguise is pretty much useless when you're up against a mountain of digital data. And we're not talking about just one type of evidence. They're pointing to an entire ecosystem of data. You've got body cam footage, video and audio. You've got your own cell phone's location records. And then you have the hard paper trail, payroll records, tax forms, even tracking documents for bonus payments. And here's the playbook they lay out. The theory is that a prosecutor doesn't even need a confession. They can just connect the dots. They take the timestamp and location from official video, then they layer it over the timestamp and location from your personal cell phone data. And just like that, they can prove exactly who is at a specific place at a specific time, building a really powerful case. So that's the prediction. But the story doesn't end there. Now we have to talk about the reaction, because the comment section for this video wasn't just a sidebar. It became a huge part of the story itself. Thousands of people jumped in, amplifying and even adding to the creator's original warnings. And this phrase, it was everywhere. Seriously, over and over again. It is easily the most common and most historically heavy reference in the entire comment section. By bringing up the trials of Nazi war criminals, commenters were framing these actions in the most severe terms possible. Another huge theme was the financial side of things. The creator mentioned a bonus, and people just latched onto that. The comments were filled with this sentiment, the idea that any extra money made today is just going to be spent on lawyers tomorrow. This comment really captures the moral angle of the public reaction. And you saw this idea in all kinds of different ways. The feeling that no amount of short-term pay is worth the long-term ethical and legal consequences. The original creator actually broke down the potential consequences into a spectrum. On one end, you've got the bare minimum scenario, a knock on the door, followed by years of your life just evaporating in expensive legal battles. But then there's the worst-case scenario, actually being sent to prison for violating constitutional rights, where the creator predicts there'd be no protection at all from other inmates. And the prediction wasn't just about external consequences. The creator also warned about internal collapse, suggesting that as soon as the legal pressure starts, agents will turn on each other, throwing one another under the bus. They even voiced a specific concern that minority agents could be set up as scapegoats by their colleagues. So what about that age-old defense? I was just following orders. Well, tons of commenters were ready for that one. They kept pointing back to the Nuremberg trials, where that very defense was largely rejected. The historical precedent they're citing is that individuals are ultimately responsible for their own actions, even if they were commanded to do them. But, of course, not everyone was on board. You could also find plenty of skeptical voices in the comments raising some really valid counterpoints. People were asking, couldn't an outgoing president just pardon everyone? Or what about accountability for things that happened in past administrations? And maybe the biggest one, would a new government really have the political willpower to see this through? So when you boil it all down, this entire viral moment shines a huge spotlight on the fundamental question of accountability. The original source presents one possible future with total certainty, and it leaves us all with a pretty heavy thought to chew on. In an age of digital evidence and shifting political winds, what really is the ultimate fate of the just following orders defense?